Hello everybody. Today I'm going to be doing a quick breakdown of my precision mechanism factory in my Create Arcane Engineering world. I posted a showcase of the mechanisms and people seemed to be interested in how everything was done. So I'm going to pick apart each mechanism and walk you through the step-by-step process. I've never done a video like this before, so any feedback would be much appreciated. But with all that out of the way, let's get into the first mechanism. Let's start off by going through the different components of the mechanism, the first of which being the rotating drill arms. These arms are powered and controlled using clutches and water wheels located here and here. The arms are simply mechanical bearings attached to a water wheel and a clutch. The clutch is controlled remotely by a circuit I'll touch on later. In addition, each arm has a redstone contact attached, which tells the circuit when the arms are back in their original position. The next part of the mechanism is the arm that deploys the redstone onto the skystone catalyst. The arm works in two parts. The first is a gantry carriage, which is controlled by this sequence gearshift. The arm also has a set of contraption controls attached, which stop the deployers from activating when the carriage is moving. The second part of the mechanism is the mechanical bearing, which is controlled by this sequence gearshift. This spins the deployers, making them activate and use the redstone dust on the catalyst. Now that the mechanism itself is done, let's look at the redstone wiring that controls it. The circuitry isn't too advanced, but I still want to take it piece by piece to explain it to people who, like me, are not very redstone inclined. So let's start at the beginning of the circuit. Right here is what is called an AND gate. That means that both of these redstone links have to be activated to send the signal. These redstone links are linked to the redstone contact on both of the arms of the drilling mechanism. When both of these are activated, that means that both of the drill arms are in their starting position and it is safe to initiate the deployer arm. Next up is the deployer activation. This first redstone link is triggered, which activates the gantry I showed earlier. Then, after a 3-second timer, the circuit activates the mechanical bearing, which spins the deployers. And finally, after a 2-second pause, the circuit activates the gantry again, calling it back to its original position. Finally, the toggle latches that control the mechanical bearings of the drill arm. These latches serve two purposes. They stop the mechanical bearings once they've done a full rotation, as well as they start the bearings back up again 5 seconds after the gantry has been called back. You might notice that these redstone links have the same frequency as the ones that started the circuit. This is essentially what makes the circuit loop, making it fully autonomous. Alright, so the next two steps are just kind of basic create mod things, so I think I'm going to kind of blast through them. But anyway, the skystone is deposited onto the belt in stacks of 3 before running through a brass tunnel set to split, which splits it into singular items. This isn't necessary or efficient, but I like the look of constant movement more than I like the look of big stacks. After being split, the skystone is ground up into skystone dust, which is then put back onto a singular belt and ran through a round-robin brass tunnel. I could have just done straight belts, but I had to find a way to make this room at least a little interesting. Lastly, the skystone dust is mixed with water to make volatile sky solution, which is then pumped into our next contraption. Now, back to something at least mildly interesting. This contraption uses this sequenced assembly recipe to turn redstone seeds into redstone clusters. The recipe is only successful 39% of the time, but the only salvage it produces is redstone seeds. One of these mechanical arms is responsible for loading new redstone seeds onto the platform, while the other one is dedicated to taking completed redstone clusters and moving them on to the next step of the process. The redstone wiring for this machine is actually really simple. When the platform returns to its starting position, it triggers this redstone contact, which starts a 5-second timer before triggering this sequence gearshift. The gantry moves the redstone seeds under the spouts to pour our volatile sky solution onto them before traveling further down the line to get sanded into redstone clusters. The only issue with this setup is that the deployers, if left unchecked, will place down the sand, getting it everywhere. So to combat that, I added a second redstone contact and inverted the signal into a clutch, meaning the deployers will only operate when the platform is beneath them. This machine is almost exactly the same setup as the last one. Redstone contact here, 4-second timer there, sequence gear shift here, bing bang boom, you got yourself an oven. Once the redstone is bulk blasted, it's split into 7 different belts using these brass tunnels. One of the tracks leads into a storage container. These 4 lead to the next processing phase. The middle track routes the redstone back to the skystone generator, and the far right track sends the redstone into a Tinker's Construct smeltery where it's melted down into destabilized redstone. Each redstone dust melts into 100 millibuckets of destabilized redstone. The next step of the process is spouting that destabilized redstone onto redstone dust to make rose quartz. Each dust requires 25 millibuckets of destabilized redstone to complete the recipe. That means that for every 4 rose quartz you want to make, you have to melt down 1 redstone dust. Fun fact, in Create Arcane Engineering, you can use arboreal extractors on blazing archwood trees for a small source of infinite lava. After the spouting process, the rose quartz is then split up onto 2 tracks. One feeds back into the system to be ground down into redstone seeds, while the other is carried on to the next step of the process, which is pouring molten iron onto the rose quartz to make electron tubes. The iron is generated by first mining stone and using millstones to turn it into gravel. The gravel is then washed into iron nuggets and flint. The flint is filtered out using this smart chute, while the iron nuggets are dropped into the smeltery to be melted down. The last thing we need to automate before the final assembly is variable cards. These cards can be crafted with this recipe, which uses crystallized mineral chunks and paper. Crystallized mineral chunks have a chance to drop when cutting down mineral trees, but they can also be crafted by running a block of crystallized mineral over a mechanical saw. These blocks can be obtained by pumping mineral resin out of mineral trees using arboreal extractors and pumping the resin into a drying basin. Last but not least, the paper. I've set up a small sugarcane farm with a gantry carriage moving back and forth using this toggle latch and gear shift setup. The last machine can be split up into 4 parts. First is the loading mechanism. Over on the left side of the machine, the required items are loaded onto weighted ejectors and launched to one of these 2 belts. These belts feed into the deployers via andesite funnels. Deployers will only accept items that match the filter that's been selected, so you don't have to worry about things getting out of order. Next, we have the deployer arms. These arms are attached to a mechanical bearing and a sequence gear shift. This redstone clock controls the timing. Each time the circuit sends a signal, the gear shift activates, moving the arms to the next position. Each of the deployer arms has a shaft running through it, which connects it to this shaft and powers the deployer. Similar to the sand deployers earlier, this system ensures that the deployers only activate when they are needed. This machine has 4 arms, 3 of which are used for the sequence assembly, but the 4th arm is what makes the entire system function. It has a redstone contact attached to it that activates this redstone link once it's in position. This sends a signal to the next part of the machine, letting it know that it's time to rotate the platform. This is the bearing that controls the platform the items are put on. When the redstone link receives a signal from the corresponding one that I just showed, it activates this sequence gear shift, which moves the platform 1 position. Now, The last piece of this contraption are the mechanical arms. The one on the left side takes the basic kinetic mechanism and places it onto the platform. The one on the right side takes the completed mechanism and places them onto a belt using a funnel with a filter, so the arm never takes off an incomplete mechanism. So with that out of the way, we're pretty much done. I may have left out a few things like the sand generation for the redstone clusters, but I figured that was pretty simple and I couldn't really figure out a way to slot it in and make it feel good. I also just wanted to thank you for making it all the way to the end. Like I said before, I've never actually done anything like this before, so probably wasn't great. But hopefully you learned something or at least enjoyed yourself. If you have any questions or suggestions or anything like that, let me know in the comments. But yeah, enough of my rambling. Hope you have a nice day. See ya.